Last year, as winter approached, I seized the opportunity for a weekend hike in a nearby national park before the onset of the cold and snowy season. A friend had recommended a less traveled trail that promised a scenic lake view, so I set out to explore it. Upon arrival, however, I found the trail unmarked, a mere narrow track weaving through the trees. Despite the lack of signage, the path appeared simple enough to navigate. It was evident from the scant footprints that it wasn't frequently traversed, and it lacked the polish of a professionally maintained route. This observation didn't unsettle me. Rather, it was a curious detail I mentally noted. The surrounding woods were a delight, teeming with animals and showered with autumn leaves. Roughly a mile in, I encountered an oddity, a secondary trail branching off into the forest. I continued on my chosen path, puzzled by the existence of these additional, seemingly purposeless trails. After about 3 hours of hiking, the trail abruptly terminated. No path lay ahead, only an unbroken expanse of trees. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps caught my attention. Turning around, I spotted a man in the distance, clad in a tattered jacket, devoid of any gear, crossing from the main trail onto a side path. His presence and demeanor were unsettling, prompting me to remain out of sight. As daylight waned, I decided to forego the lake and return to my vehicle. But within minutes, I stumbled upon a crossroads I didn't recall encountering earlier. Realizing I might have veered off course when the original path ended, I searched for my own footprints to no avail. Then the footsteps returned. I spun around to find the same man standing in the forest, silently observing me. A shiver coursed through me, and I hastened down the trail furthest from him. Glancing back repeatedly, I eventually lost sight of the man. For more than an hour, I trekked along the trail, my mind occupied with thoughts of being lost and the unsettling man I had encountered. Eventually, I stepped off the path to rest against a tree and hydrate. Barely a moment had passed when those familiar footsteps echoed again. Concealed behind the tree, I listened as the shuffling grew closer until the man passed by. Seemingly unaware of my presence, his gaze fixed on the trail ahead. It was clear to me that he was following me, or at least attempting to. As soon as he disappeared from view, I seized the chance to dash back the way I had come. Reaching a junction of paths, I quickly chose one that seemed to lead in the correct direction. Fortune was on my side, as I eventually recognized the route back to my vehicle, guided only by the faint glow of the moonlight through the forest canopy. Reflecting on the encounter, I can't shake the feeling that the man's presence in the wilderness wasn't for leisurely hiking. His behavior suggested malign intentions, which I believe I narrowly escaped. At the age of 19, during a summer break from college, I found myself residing at my childhood home in the city with my mother. My father, on the other hand, had relocated to a quaint abode on the outskirts, adjacent to a serene woodland. The tranquility of the location always brought me peace. That summer, I was struck by the urge to embark on a solo camping trip in the woods behind my father's dwelling. Having previously camped and possessing all the necessary equipment, I envisioned a simple, enjoyable overnight stay not too far into the forest. Departing a couple of hours before dusk, I ventured into the woods, fully immersed in the natural soundscape, until I deemed it time to establish my campsite. After erecting my tent and igniting a campfire, I settled in for the evening. Post a few hours of slumber, I awoke with the inclination to linger a while longer. A leisurely stroll and some time spent by my tent ensued, and unexpectedly, the day seemed to accelerate, with dusk approaching swiftly. After tidying up my site, I commenced my return journey. Navigating through the trees, I engaged in internal dialogue to while away the time. However, as daylight waned, I became aware of the duration of my trek. Pausing to survey my surroundings, I realized I was amidst unfamiliar terrain. Despite no clear path, I pressed on in my chosen direction, hopeful of encountering a road. As darkness enveloped the woods, anxiety took hold. Desperately searching for any sign of direction in the now opaque forest, a glimmer of light caught my attention. Approaching what appeared to be an isolated house, I found no indication of a road or neighboring dwellings, just an antiquated cabin with a solitary lit window. With reluctance, I concluded that seeking assistance from the inhabitants was my sole recourse. Approaching the entrance, I rang the bell and announced my predicament, requesting guidance to the nearest thoroughfare. After a brief silence, the door swung open, revealing two middle-aged men, somewhat unkempt, standing before me. One individual advanced, peering behind me into the forest as if searching for someone else. Silence fell for a brief moment. "Step inside. We'll assist you," one of them offered, pulling the door back further and making room. I declined. "No, thank you. Just point me the right way. That's all I need." I insisted, reluctant to enter an unfamiliar dwelling amidst the woods without any apparent necessity. The men's expressions soured, and one queried about my presence in the area. I explained my situation as a camper who had strayed off course, yet their exchanged glances suggested skepticism. Subsequently, one emerged closer, scrutinizing the surrounding trees with greater intensity. His movement disclosed the interior, revealing a room with a lone lamp casting light upon a dusty floor. I instinctively distanced myself, and their demeanor shifted abruptly. Their faces and gestures became void of warmth, and in a sudden move, one attempted to grapple me to the ground. Fortuitously, my reflexes allowed me to evade their grasp, and I dashed into the shelter of the trees. The sound of pursuit echoed behind me, but it ceased once I was concealed by the woods, and the house's illumination was extinguished shortly after. It took hours before I reached a road, only to discover I had trekked far astray. Relaying this ordeal to my father, he reported it to the authorities. The revelation that the structure was a long-deserted holiday lodge sent chills down our spines. The men had presumably operated a generator to power their setup. Their intentions remain a mystery, but their behavior suggested they were keen to avoid detection. Had they managed to coerce me inside, I fear what might have become of me. On my return journey to my birthplace after a work-related trip earlier that week, I opted out of the complimentary round-trip flight. I had planned to extend my stay for a brief holiday. Although I had never embarked on an extensive road trip before, the longest being a 10-hour drive with an overnight hotel break. The prospect of a nearly 20-hour drive to my destination didn't deter me, despite only booking a single hotel stop. Initially, the drive was smooth, with the bustling activity of cities and towns, and the company of other vehicles on the road. However, as I ventured further, the traffic thinned, and the urban landscape gave way to open fields and dense woodlands. The gentle rain that began in the afternoon soon intensified, obscuring visibility as I delved deeper into the forested area. Despite my hopes for the rain to subside by dusk, it persisted, compelling me to concentrate intensely on the road to avoid any mishaps. An hour into the night, the road's straight path transformed into serpentine twists, leading me deeper into the woods where the dense canopy obscured any view. The unusual nature of this highway section made me uneasy. Concerned, I decelerated and parked on the roadside to consult my phone for directions, only to find no signal. My memory of the route was vague. I recalled that it involved following the same highway for the majority of the journey. Whether I was still on the correct path or had inadvertently deviated due to the distracting rain was unclear. Peering through the relentless downpour, I searched for any signage that might reveal my location, but the darkness enveloped everything beyond the reach of my headlights. Suddenly, a light appeared behind me. It grew brighter as it approached, its brilliance blinding me to the vehicle itself. The light slowed to a halt directly behind me. Mixed feelings of relief and apprehension washed over me as I waited. After a minute, the other vehicle's door opened, and a figure clad in a dark hoodie, seemingly indifferent to the rain, approached my car. As I cracked my window open, he inquired if I needed assistance. I explained my predicament, seeking confirmation of my location and whether I remained on the correct highway. The man glanced at me and then peered into the back seat before affirming, "Sure, I can assist you. Just need to grab my phone." With that, he walked away, and I quickly rolled up my window, sheltering myself from the relentless rain. Something about our exchange felt unsettling, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. It struck me as odd that he didn't seem to know our exact location, or whether we were still on the main highway. I kept an eye on him through the mirrors as he disappeared behind the intense glow of his vehicle's lights, fumbling with something in his car before re-emerging. Approaching again, I noticed he was holding something in his hand. Instinctively, I shifted my car into drive just as he crouched by my rear tire and thrust an object into it. I hit the accelerator, catching the man off guard as he recoiled, allowing me to speed away. The possibility of him pursuing me sent me into a state of panic, and I drove frantically for several minutes, dreading the thought of his headlights reappearing in my rearview mirror. Fortunately, they never did. Roughly 3 miles later, I reached a crossroads with a sign indicating a nearby gas station. Upon arrival, I immediately contacted the authorities. It was then that I discovered the man had pierced my tire with a screwdriver, which was still lodged in its side, protruding slightly. The fact that it remained there, plugging the hole, was likely the sole reason I managed to escape without my car breaking down mid-journey. Reflecting on the narrowness of my escape, I realized that had I hesitated even a moment longer, I might not have been found after that harrowing night.